Welcome to The Bridge, Your Health, Your Voice, the official podcast for the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Pharmacy Patients Program. The Patients Program is the bridge between the community and researchers. The Patients Program created this partnership to help researchers listen to the community's voice in order to build a bridge to an effective learning healthcare community. Here's your host, Rodney Elliott.
Good afternoon, Pastor Lance. How are you?
I'm doing well, Rodney. Good to see you again, my friend.
Man, glad to be seen. Good to see you as always. And March Madness is over, so I don't know if you had a chance in your busy schedule to check out a couple games. What do you think of March Madness this year?
I love it. So it's actually my favorite time of year. So I'm a big sports fan, but NCAA basketball, both men's and women, I absolutely love it. I did catch some games. UConn do what UConn does.
Yeah.
And South Carolina, an undefeated season. So I loved it. March Madness. I'm actually sad that it's over.
I'm going to stop right here because this podcast can turn into a whole nother kind of podcast when we talk about sports. But I like this, and we can talk about that another time. But today I'm here with Pastor Lance, Frank Lance. He's a friend of the Patients Program, a partner of the Patients Program. He's worn many hats with us here at the Patients Program. As you see, we have outside bar conversations about sports all the time. But today we're here to talk about some of the things that he's been a part of and will be a part of going forward in his role as, obviously, we know, the lead pastor over there at Mount Lebanon Baptist Church in West Baltimore, Parks of People. But also, there's a big thing that's going on with Mount Lebanon as far as celebrating is concerned, right? 100-year anniversary, Pastor Lance. Let's talk a little bit about that and what that means to you as someone who's been, a great leader in the West Baltimore community, specifically for your Mount Lebanon people.
Rodney, thank you for that compliment and for the opportunity to talk about Mount Lebanon. So for those of you who may not know, the Mount Lebanon Baptist Church is in West Baltimore. On May 26th of this year, on May 26th, the Mount Lebanon Baptist Church will turn 100 years old, and we are very proud of the church. It has always been, for its 100 years, a community-focused church. So Rodney talked about being a friend of patients. We humbly and willingly, of our own volition, wanted to be a part of patients because it is part of who we are as Mount Lebanon. We are community-focused. 100 years. We've only had 3 pastors. I'm just the third pastor in that 100-year tenure of the Mount Lebanon Baptist Church. And so we look with great excitement toward March 26th, when we will celebrate that 100 years, even as we look to the next 100. So thank you, Rodney, for that opportunity.
For sure. I know how the relationship started with Patients Program stems all the way back to Dr. Mullins attending an event and Gail kind of pushing him all the way in the back in the corner. And next thing you know, Dr. Mullins is helping set up the event and Gail's looking on. And now we're here to 100 years celebration coming up in this May. But there probably have been some significant milestones in your tenure as pastor, Pastor Lance. So can you talk to us a little bit about what some of those significant milestones or events in the history of the church that have led to this remarkable 100-year anniversary?
Absolutely. So I want to do both. So I want to talk about the past 20 years. So May 26th is the church's 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
May 19th is my 20th anniversary as senior pastor.
Okay.
So we celebrate my 20th anniversary one week, and then the very next Sunday celebrate the church's 100th. So over the past 20 years, what we've attempted to do is really 2 things. One, how do we continue the legacy, continue our mode of operation to ensure that we're community focused? And then 2, how do we do that in today so that we're relevant, right? And so one of the first things, right, at which we look is how do we continue to serve the community in the 2000s, because that's going to be different than what we did in 1960. That's going to be different than what we did in 1940, right? And so some of the first things we did, we start looking at outside partnerships. We found 3 things that we needed to address in order to serve the community and the congregation. We needed to work on workforce development. So when I first took over, the Greater Mondawmin community had a 20% unemployment rate. So we knew, number one, if we were going to be relevant in this community, we needed to focus on helping people find jobs. 1. 2, we knew we needed to work on wellness care. one of the things that we discovered was a number of people in the community was going to the ER, Sinai or Good Shepherd, for normal routine things because they did not have a primary care physician. They did not have any way of doing wellness care. So 2, we knew we needed to focus on wellness care. And then 3, financial literacy. One of the other things we discovered is that people were going to predatory lenders. They were doing car title lenders and payday lenders and check cashing places. And so we knew if we were going to be relevant in the 2000s, we needed to help people find jobs, we needed to work on wellness care, and we needed to do financial literacy. For us, and this leads right into today, this meant stepping outside of the 4 walls of the church and partnering with people like the Patients Program at University of Maryland, Baltimore. This also meant partnering with CVS Health, partnering with Aetna, partnering with the Greater Mondawmin Coordinating Council. So we've been doing this kind of work for 20 years and bringing that, and I think this is the difference, Rodney. We weren't asking our members and congregations to go to those partners I mentioned. We brought those partners to the church. So CVS Health is a partner with Mount Lebanon in the building. The Patients Program is a partner with Mount Lebanon coming to the building. And so we've brought these partnerships there. We will do job fairs and health fairs, resource fairs. And so we do those in the building. And then finally, one of the other things that we realized is we needed to address what we call pain points, where people were hurting and traumatized and not able to deal with it. One of the things that we discovered was that we needed to launch a domestic violence ministry. The numbers show 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 10 men will experience intimate partner violence. So their significant other will somehow damage them emotionally, financially, physically. And so we needed to address that. And those numbers are no different in the church and outside of the church. The other thing that we needed to address was HIV. In the 21215 zip code, when I took over in 2024, 21215 had one of the highest HIV incidence rates in the city. So there was no way in authenticity that we could claim to be addressing needs and not dealing with that. So we launched the HIV ministry. We launched a domestic violence ministry, in addition to those other things that I mentioned, and that's how we're attempting to stay relevant. Those are things we've done in the last 20 years, and I'm very proud of those, and that really was just a continuation of what the church has done for 100 years.
That's fantastic, Pastor Lance, and I've heard about some of those initiatives, worked on some of those initiatives because the Patients Program has been a part of those initiatives, and when we here in the Patients Program talk a lot about meeting the community where they are, right? Our offices are centered right here on University of Maryland campus, downtown Baltimore, but a lot of work we do is across Martin Luther King in those neighborhoods. So you have to find a way, again, to meet the community where you are. So those initiatives you talk about, where you're addressing finding folks jobs and talking about wellness care and financial literacy, partnering with CBS, Aetna, organizations like that, those initiatives and those community outreach programs are essential for not only the church, but the community around the church to survive, to stay afloat. Can you give us some feedback from both sides? Because when we at the Patients Program talk about meeting the community where they are, we understand by bringing resources or bringing opportunities to the community, yes, we call ourselves doing a good deed and, helping folks out. The community learns and understands that, but I'm impressed sometimes with some of these big partners, these big organizations, or some of our doctors and researchers literally come out to the community and they get an opportunity to experience what it's like to be there. So do you have any stories where your community has responded well or just gave some feedback, or to be quite honest, some of your partners, your CBS partners, your Aetna partners come in and said, you know what, I'm glad I did this, or I'm glad I had the opportunity to literally come and see it from their perspective?
Absolutely, Rodney. And again, thank you for that question. We see this, unfortunately, far too often where, I'm going to start with the corporate partners, where they're focused on the bottom line. So there was a famous economist named Milton Friedman, and he asserted that a corporation only had one purpose, and that purpose was to maximize return for shareholders. And anything outside of that really was not the job of the corporation. I'm glad that there are others who see it 180 degrees different. and they believe that there is a need to be a good corporate partner. Far too often that we focus on the bottom line, and you see this all the time. You'll see in the news almost every day. Some entity is closing down stores, banks are closing down branches, things are leaving, and they fail to understand the impact to the community. So Greater Mondawmin, Target leaving, that was a huge impact for us, right? And so I'm glad to see organizations with whom we've worked who've seen the difference. So CVS Health, as an example, they've come in, they're working with us, and they have seen where if they give more, and let me be specific, they're now funding in perpetuity our college scholarship. So we have signed an agreement with CVS Health where they will fund for us the ability to give out college scholarships to our members, right? And that's huge. But here's what it means for them, because it's not all altruistic. You talked earlier about goodwill. The fact of the matter is, if you have healthier constituents, then those healthier constituents become customers and consumers of the business services.
Yep.
And so they understand that duality so that, yes, they can feed into what we do, but then by feeding into what we do, my people are more likely to go to a CVS pharmacy because CVS Health is funding our scholarships. Right?
Yeah.
It's that give and take, right? Yeah. You mentioned patients. My relationship with patients started roughly 15, 16 years ago. And it was because Dr. C. Daniel Mullins came to us and said, we want to work on prostate screening for your men.
Yep.
So there are some silent killers that we don't talk about enough, right? We don't talk about colon rectal cancer. We don't talk about prostate issues. Dr. Mullins came to us roughly circa 2007, 2008, and said, we want to do this, right? And what that said for us is this outside entity is concerned about our health. So let's see what we can give back. What is the quid pro quo? And that started that relationship. And out of that now 15, 16-year-old relationship, it has grown and matured so much so that one of the things that Dr. Mullins and I said to each other is that I trust Dr. C. Daniel Mullins, he trusts me, but how do we morph this relationship? How do we mature this relationship so it's not individual trust, it's institutional trust? And that, Rodney, is the next Darwinian leap for this kind of work. And that's what we're doing with patients. That's also what we're doing with these other partners, such that the relationship lives beyond Frank Lance and beyond Dr. Mullins because it's institutional and not simply individual.
You weren't in one of our last team meetings, but Dr. Muller touched on that exact topic you talked about, right? From when you guys first started, the give and take, the quid pro quo, which you mentioned, but also the bidirectional learning from you guys learning from each other, but also the relationships outside of the patients program, outside of Mount Lebanon, learning from each other. And now to the point where you want to take that trust, you want that to be matured, you want that to be an opportunity where folks are growing together, but also you want it to live, you know, and be around for the long haul, right? And have trust between institutions. And I think that's the next step. That's the next step to what I'd like to do as far as called community engagement, right? Like, you know, meet the community where they are, but how can we make sure now that not only does Rodney and Pastor Lance trust each other, but again, right, university trusts Mount Lebanon's community trusts university. So now when there's opportunities to work together, there's a shared governance or shared goal to aspire to reach together. And as we know, when you do reach together, oh man, like it just brings so many other opportunities out there for both communities. So kudos to the work that you've done up until this point, Pastor Lance. And you know, when we talk about the church's success and you've been there for 20 years, and congratulations on you being there for 20 years. How do you envision, or can you talk a little bit about more envisioning what the future of the church looks like, and what are some of the key goals or aspirations that you think are next along the journey?
So I love that, right? So we've talked about the fact that on May 26th, we will be 100 years old.
Yep.
And what we need to be doing is then not looking reflectively at the past 100, but looking proactively at the future 100. So what's next? And I love that question, right? So what's next? And for us, it's a matter of continuing to stay relevant. There were three things I wanted when I took over. I wanted us to be relevant. Let's find out what the pain points are in the community, and let's ensure that we can address those. And if we can't address those, let's find partners who can. So one was relevance. Two was solvency. Like any institution, even with the church, we need to be able to pay our bills, right? So how are we solvent? And then three, how are we sustainable? And that's a combination of the two. Sustainability in this case means continual relevance and continual solvency, right? And so that was the focus, and that still is the focus moving forward. We look every year at what relevance means. So I have a former business background. We look every year for needs assessment. What are the needs of the community? As we exist right now, we currently have some transitional housing in the West Baltimore community. So now we are ideating now on how do we serve the residents of the transitional housing. What we have found is that they need safe housing. There are resources that they need, food resources. So we are reactivating our food pantry. We are looking at partners that can provide safe housing. We are looking at partners that do not hold your past against you as it relates to employment. So we look at continual relevance and continual solvency. So, Roddy, I want to address that. And for people who may see this who are church members and or pastors, you will be hard-pressed moving forward to be solvent, relying upon tithes and offerings only. And I know that some people may challenge that, and I'm okay with that challenge.
I'm going to play pastor role right now a little bit. Can you repeat that? Can you say that again?
I will repeat that. You will be hard-pressed to remain solvent, relying upon tithes and offerings only. So, as a former business person, we always talked about diversifying revenue. You cannot depend on one client or one source of revenue alone. Doing so could hurt you. And we have seen this. This has played out recently in history, right? So let's assume I was a restaurant, and it was a thriving restaurant. And then the pandemic happened. And guess what I didn't have? I didn't have people coming to eat. So what happened? We had to close up, right? Let's assume that I was a fitness center. I was a Planet Fitness location or a movie theater. I didn't have customers come. You need diversification of revenue. So what I'm saying to church people, I'm not against tithes and offerings. I'm a pastor. I talk about them. But if you rely on them only, then what you're doing is giving yourself a single point of failure. So how else can you generate revenue? Here are some of the things that we as churches have. We have buildings that largely, Rodney, go unused for the 7 days of the week. For the most part, we use our buildings on Sunday, maybe on Saturdays. Well, those resources can be used the rest of the week. There are people that need meeting spaces, and they need classrooms, and they need conference spaces. And if you configure it properly, you can use your building for that. In a lot of cases, we have land. There are people who need use of the land. You can use that, right? In a number of cases, you have places where you can put up solar panels and sell the energy that you generate. And so what's next for us? It is remaining relevant. What's the needs of the community? And remaining solvent. The two together gives us sustainability.
Staying ahead of the curves. I like it. That sounds great, Pastor Lance. I love your business model, the way you think about it, and you incorporate that along with still delivering the message. It's imperative that folks use certain instances that happen in life to grow and be innovative. When we talk about the pandemic, that's something that nobody knew was going to happen, or I guess if they did, they didn't know what the ramifications of it were. You talk about businesses shutting down, restaurants. There were some churches that shut down as well. But being innovative to stay relevant, to stay solvent, I think is fantastic. And you talk about those pain points, recognizing the pain points in the community. As the engagement specialist, there have been many a times I've gone out to the community to talk about a project or talk about an event, talk about an opportunity for a community member to participate in said project. But they have said, Mr. Elliott or Rodney, I would love to participate, but I have XYZ going on. And it is not my job to go out there and force what I got going on for someone to participate, take time away from their home, their job, or their family to participate in the project when they got other issues going on. So to recognize that you're addressing some of these pain points, I think is great for the community. It's innovative, and it may be a little bit outside the box, but at the end of the day, when you talk about the community that you serve, sometimes you got to go outside of the box to help folks out. So again, kudos to you and your team, Pastor Laspeth, for addressing that issue. We'll shift gears a little bit because there's another hat that you're wearing right now for the Patience Program. And as the Patience Program went back to figuring out what's next for us and where we're going, what direction we're going, they developed a new steering committee. And who else did they not want, or they want to lead the steering committee is you, Pastor Lansco. So congratulations on that. What are some of the primary goals or objectives that you've talked to Dr. Mullins, you guys have talked about that can help steer the steering committee this year?
All right. So first of all, I'm elated to the fact that I was asked to do this. I'm honored to do this. So that's first. One of the things that's helped us a great deal was a strategic plan was done. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm a business person. We talk about two things. We talk about what are you doing tactically and what are you doing strategically. For those that don't know, tactical is always defined as short term. And typically that's 6 months to a year. Strategically is what are you doing beyond that? The successful businesses look at both. What do I need to do right now? But where do I want to go? And so right now, I'm related to the fact that a strategic plan has been done. It gives me a roadmap for the steering committee as I start looking at patients. We can continue doing what we're doing. That's tactical. Yep. A strategic plan helps us to focus on the future. And one of the things, Rodney, you mentioned this word earlier, is governance. One of the keys here is we've always said with the steering committee that we wanted the community and the community representatives to have a greater say, a greater vote than in case there was some disagreement. Now, I'm elated to say we've never had that a strategic plan has been done. I'm a business guy. We always talk about tactical and we talk about strategic. Tactical is short term, typically 6 months to a year. Strategic is beyond that. And by way of having a strategic plan, I'm able to give guidance over both. Tactical, we can continue doing what we're doing. Strategically, we have this plan to give us a roadmap for that. And one of the things that this plan talks about that we've always had in mind is this idea of governance. And governance for us is how do we ensure that the community's voice is authentic? What we've done historically is say that the community actually had more votes on any issue than did the Patience Program. And that was in case there was some disagreement, then the community could always outvote in this case.
Yes.
Now, I'm elated to say we've never had that. That's never been the issue. So for the most part, we've always understood where we wanted to go. So, Rodney, I'm going to teach for a moment. There's this common Greek word, symphoneo, right? And symphoneo means, we get symphony out of it, right? We get symphony, but it means one voice. For the most part, the steering committee of Patience has historically been symphoneo. It has historically been one voice. We talk about issues, we discuss them, and we move forward in one voice. The strategic plan helps me lay out how do we move forward in the future in one voice. We keep this governance structure. We understand what we're trying to accomplish. We understand that we want to change the paradigm of research such that community members, they're not subjects, they're participants. They know that they have a voice. They know that they have a say. And we're able to do this in such a way from the steering committee so that we are symphoneo. We are one voice.
I like that. There was this event at the Symphony Hall. It's funny you mentioned that, where they actually were playing symphony music, but it was geared towards hip hop. And it was great to hear some of my old school hip hop songs being played on violin and flute and bass and guitar, and something but when it's all put together, it comes out beautifully. And this group, when we're talking about our steering committee, is built up of different pieces from the community. It's not all University of Maryland members. It's not all community members. It's a mixture of both. So my next question to you is, how can individual members contribute effectively to the committee, to the committee's work for the overall success? Like, that's important when we talk about the governance and folks being quote unquote outvoted. This situation never happens. That's great. But when we talk about individual members contributing effectively, I love the fact that it's made up of a kind of a melting pot, so to speak. How effective is that to your goals?
Rodney, it's not just effective, it's essential. It is an imperative. And I want to go back to where you were a second ago in order to answer your question. You talked about the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra and hip hop. I actually attended 2 shows, and maybe you were there, but one was when they did the tribute to Biggie and
to
Tupac.
Biggie Smalls. Yeah, that's the one I was at.
That's the one. So I was there. The other they just did this past Friday night when they did a tribute to Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, Rodney. Here's what I want to talk about in order to answer your question. In both cases, they talked about a fusion of classical music and of these modern artists. This fusion, this weaving together. Now, here's the point. You already said it. There, you have disparate instruments. So you have the classicals written hundreds of years ago being woven with hip hop and rap artists and using current instruments like a full drum set, right? Like the current guitar. Rodney, what we're doing on the steering committee is a fusion. It is a fusion of voices, a fusion of experiences, a fusion of education, a fusion of where we are in our walks in life. And those things come together. And you said this. In of itself, you don't have this fusion. But when the individuals bring their authentic voice, their authentic experience, and the goal is to be symphoneo, to be a symphony, the fusion comes together. And all we have by way of the patience program, it becomes the conductor of this disparate voices trying to be symphoneo. So it's not just how does it work together? It's essential that happens. Otherwise, we don't have the fusion. We don't have Biggie. We don't have Pac. We don't have Kendrick. All we still have is the BSO. But you bring it all together, and we have a fusion. That, my friend, is what we're doing.
As always, every time we sit down and have a conversation, it seems like we just take it to church all the time, man. That's just in you, so it is what it is, and I appreciate you delivering the message that way. But yes, that does make sense, because I like sometimes sitting a fly on the wall, so to speak, or maybe sitting as a box on a Zoom meeting. And I love when I hear I'm in meetings where we have folks that are just throwing ideas out there. And the good thing about it is it's not always agreeable all the time. Folks aren't always saying, yes, that's right, or I agree here. They're talking and they're understanding that each person on the steering committee has a particular background, have particular lived experiences, have specific examples on how things work and how things don't work or didn't work. But together, as you guys are figuring out what this symphony looks like, I think the Patience Program is in great hands. I think that the Patience Program has done work ahead of time to kind of give the steering committee a guideline, a roadmap, so to speak. But just as we know, when we go along these roads, on these journeys, there are potholes out there. There are trees falling in the road that you didn't know on the map, but you got to find ways to navigate around that. But if you have folks that have lived experience in those in those spaces, it makes the group feel a little bit more confident going forward. So, and to have a person like yourself who has that business background, folks who have a person who's a leader of a clergy, leader of a community, with the experience there as well. The Patience Program is in great hands with you being head of the steering committee. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Are there any upcoming initiatives or projects that the committee is currently discussing, working on, planning, or that you want to maybe address or you want to bring to the team?
So one of the things at which we're looking as it relates to patients, and again, we talked about this, is this continued, how do we move forward, right? So we're not trying to rest on our laurels of the prior projects. We're also looking at new.
Yeah.
And so we will continue to talk about how do we have this impact in the community. So we're looking now at what new things do we need to be researching. There are some historic social determinants of health issues in disenfranchised communities. And in a number of cases, some of these don't get addressed or don't get addressed well. So you started to touch on this some time ago in this discussion, Rodney, about some of the hindrances, some of the concerns people have about participating in research. There's history behind that.
Yeah.
Right. So we have some issues with an institution in East Baltimore. We have issues with out of Tuskegee, right? There are things where people say, I don't know if I can trust that. What we're trying to do with patients is develop trust, i.e. trustworthiness, by being willing to sign on the dotted line a memo of commitment. Here's what we're committing to you before we even start this. This is what you will get from us. This is how we will disseminate information. This is how we will interact. More than just the IRB. We are bringing to you our trustworthiness, and we're willing to put it in writing. If we can do that moving forward, then we can take patients to the next level. That's what we're trying to do.
Again, we have to find ways to help folks who are in these communities or know a little bit more or have heard a lot about things that have happened in the past, but address them with information, address them with education so they have the proper tools that they need to go out there and address some of those issues for themselves and also for their community.
Absolutely, Rodney. And you use this word a few times. For me, it's a matter of navigation. One of the things that I absolutely love, a lot of people today are using GPS navigation, global positioning satellite navigation, right? And Rodney, even though it will detect our location where we are, and we put in where we're trying to go, it will give us a roadmap. But here's what can happen. From the time we start, there can be different roadblocks, accidents can happen, disabled cars, and it has to recalibrate and recalculate. What you're talking about is we can't be so stubborn in our navigation that it's only one way. Yep. When we encounter something that causes us to change direction, we have to be willing to do it. The GPS is actually operating 22,000 miles above the earth. It has a perspective that we don't down here. And we have to trust that it can see things we can't. And so as we're navigating, we have to trust that there are different routes that will get us to the same destination as long as we're willing to be flexible and do things a little differently. What you saw at Lexington Market, what we're seeing in some of the work that we do says, okay, we had a route that we wanted to take, but maybe there's a pivot. Maybe there's a change. Maybe there's something else that we need to do. And we'll end up at the destination, but we have to be flexible to take a different route.
I love this conversation, and I know I could sit down and talk to you for hours, but before we go, I want to talk to you a little bit about Parks and People's anniversary, because this is the anniversary series, right? You know, your role at Parks and People's, 20 years, you've had experience being a pastor at Mount Lebanon, 100-year anniversary for Mount Lebanon, the church itself. What's Parks and People? What's the new anniversary about them?
Rodney, I am so glad that you gave me that opportunity. Thank you so much. So you mentioned earlier at the start of this that I wear different hats. So I'm the senior pastor of the Mount Lebanon Baptist Church. Since May of 2019, I've also been president and CEO of a local nonprofit in Baltimore called Parks and People. It is a 3-year-old organization. We build parks, playgrounds, green space all around Baltimore City, and we do educational programming for K-12 kids. You said it, Rodney. This year, May of this year, Parks and People will be 40 years old. So May for my church, 100, May for Parks and People, 40. So this is the anniversary season for us. We will be 40 years old. We're planning a number of different events. I would just ask anybody, just check out our website, parksandpeople.org, parksandpeople.org, which you'll see a number of different events. We're in a celebratory fashion this year. We are grateful to be able to celebrate 40 years of Parks and People, 100 years of Mount Lebanon. Come and celebrate with Frank Lance, whether it's at the church or at Parks and People. Come and celebrate.
You heard it right here on the bridge. There are a lot of celebratory events coming up in May for Mount Lebanon Baptist Church, Parks and People. And Pastor Lance, I'm going to ask you when we get off of this, you can send me an email or you can share information on those events. And we will also share the links here, the information, the websites, the everything, so folks can, after they listen to this podcast, they also can come out and see what's going on over there in West Baltimore. So, Pastor Lance, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you for talking with us today, and I'm pretty sure I'll see you later down the line.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Bridge. Your health, your voice. To learn more about the Patience Program, visit our website at www.patience.umaryland.edu.